Today's daf is Masechta Bava Basra Daf Samach Beis, and we're going to start from Daf Samach Aleph Amid Beis, about like 7 lines from the bottom. Today's daf, you're probably going to need to have the visual, which I'll just maybe send it out, but I'm going to bring it up on the screen over here. It's very easy Gemara. You just need the visual to understand what the Gemara is saying, not right away. The Gemara is just discussing how language, you have to, when a person says something in language, you have to define it in its terms, even though what the person said might be ambiguous. So the Gemara brings a story over here. A man said to his friend, I'm selling you the land that I purchased from the Chia family. So the land. Now, he probably bought the entire estate, which included many different properties, and he's selling it to another person, and he said, I'm selling you that piece of land. So Haviele, Tarte are also the Havamiskarian the Bechia. The person who's doing the selling had two properties that were called the properties of Bechia. It was the Bechia properties that he bought on auction or whatever. And now we don't know which one he meant to sell. You can't judge things by the price that a person paid, because some people pay more for a property that's, like lahavdil, a person bought Ruth's jersey for 24 million. So the person pays, we don't know, so you can't just judge by the price. So we don't know which land he meant to sell to that party, the more expensive land of Bechia or the less expensive of Bechia. Or did he sell both of them? Amar Abashi, Chada Amala. He meant to sell only one piece of land from the Bechia estate, but he didn't say two, because he said Ara, or that land, which is the singular version. So therefore, he only meant to sell one piece of property of the Bechia properties that he bought. The Amale, but if he would add Arasa Stama, if you would say lands that I bought from Bechia, I'm selling to you. So Miet Arasa Shtayim, then he's only selling two pieces of property to that third party, because even though it's a plural word, the least number in plural is the number two. So even though he has 5 lands of Bechia, if he told that third party, I'm selling you Arasa lands of Bechia, he didn't mean to sell only two of the properties. That's it. The Amalei, but if he did say Kol Arasa, all the properties of Bechia, so he added the word Kol, which is very important. So every property that I have from Bechia, Kol Arasa de Islay. So he's selling every land that he has in the Bechia estate. He's selling that. Lebar, except Mibustane Upardese. If he bought a garden or a vineyard from the Bechia estate, so that he's not selling, because that's not land. Land refers to land that a field, like you can grow wheat on, but doesn't include a orchard or a vineyard. The amale, but if he said zihara, every type of land, all lands are called zihara. That includes gardens and vineyards. Afila beit bustani pardesi. Then included in the sale is the gardens and the vineyards. But it does not include levar mibote va'avde. If he has houses from Bechia or slaves from Bechia that he purchased, that's not included in the sale, because zihara only refers to real estate, nothing else. So but not the real estate means anything but the house. It's the land itself. Anything land related is included in zihara, but not slaves and not houses. Says the Gemara, the final point. The amalei nichse. If he said, I'm selling possessions that I got from Bechia, then included in that sale is the houses and the slaves, but movable items are not included in that sale, because nitznei possessions are usually referred to something that of substantial, of something that is stationary, not something that's movable. So, but it would include houses and slaves, because slaves are also compared to real estate. In the Chumash, the Torah juxtaposes the word slave next to the word achuza, which means inheritance. So slaves have the same characteristics as real estate. Now the Gemara says like this. I'm going to bring up the screen the picture. A very simple picture. A guy here in the first picture over here, guy put up onto a guy says, I'm selling you a property. So, but he says he demarcates the property in the transaction, 50 amos in the east, and then 100 amos in the west. You can see it. He demarcates it. So, what did he sell? I mean, the land itself was 100, was 100 on both ends. But he only said, 50 amos in the east and 100 amos in the west. So we're going to learn here that's a machlokes between Rav and Rav Kahana Ravasi. Meitzel, we go back into the Gemara. Meitzel metzar echad orach metzar echad kotzer. He boundaried up the land in the contract by saying the land one boundary was long, was 100 amos, and one boundary was short, like 50 amos. Alma Rav says loy kona ela keneged kotzer. You only get half the land, only what's opposite the short part. As you can see in the picture on the side by the Rashbam, you just draw a line straight down. And in my picture over here, basically according to Rav, you would get the 50 amas then why did he say it extends 100 amas in the west? He was just being exaggerating, but really you only get this box 50 by 50. Amalei Rav Kahana, Amrulei Rav Kahana Ravasi Rav. So Rav Kahana and Ravasi said to Rav, V'yikne kireged roisha tur. Let us say
I don't have a sports stuff on.
you can make it a diagonal. In other words, you can always go and say, look, he said 50 in the east, 100 in the west, and then just draw a line like I'm going to draw right here. You draw a line on a diagonal, right? And all the way down over here, and just draw a line so that's what he meant to say. He's not selling the full land, but he's making it like a trapezite. So therefore, that's what he's saying. So let's let him kinda according to that angle. So Shasik Rav was quiet. Rav held his own, but he didn't want to respond to that. It makes sense, but Rav had his reasons that he maintained his position. Says the Gemara, Rav would agree. So midahavle lemichtav le the Reuven keneged Levi, the Shimon keneged Huda v'le Kosovla, Shema mina kereged Rosh Tur Huda Amalei. Let's go back into the picture. The next picture says Rav would agree sometimes that you do draw angle off the property. You don't just give the boundary of the shorter side. If the field is bordered by a field of Reuven and a field of Shimon, as you can see over here in the picture, and the field is also bordered by a field of Levi and a field of Yehuda. What he did was he said, I'm selling you this field which borders Reuven's field, Shimon's field, and Yehuda's field. But he forgot to mention Levi's field. So then even Rav would agree, since he was so particular, mentioning where it borders and who it borders, so then he angles it off. He meant to say to give 100 in the east, right, and then 50 in the west, and then you angle off the rest of the property. That part he's not selling. The other where the angles off, he's not selling. Since he was so particular, and he didn't say Reuven opposite Levi, Shimon opposite Yehuda. He just mentioned Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda. So he was very particular about mentioning the borders of this property. And so this is probably what he meant to sell. And Rav would agree. In that case, you go on the angle. Says the Gemara. Now, Metzer Reuven, Mizrach Umarav, Umetzer Shimon, Safin V'darav. Let's say you have a property that belongs to Reuven. Reuven has the properties. We're going to go to the picture of the Rashbam. Reuven owns the property on the Mizrach and on the Marav on the west. Shimon owns the properties that borders the field on the north and the south. Right? So this is Shimon's property. But what he did was he wrote in the contract, Metzer Reuven Mizrach Marav. a border is Reuven's field from east to west, and a border is Shimon field north to south. Since he's not clear in that, we're going to assume that what he meant to say is you can take either he's selling this part or this part, because in that case he's bordering both fields, or maybe he's only selling the middle angle of the field, which borders Reuven and Shimon this way and Reuven and Shimon this way. So he's only selling the middle angle of the field, like a small strip of land in the field. So therefore, that wouldn't work. Tzarech lemichtav, if he meant to sell the whole field, he should have said, Meitza Reuven Ruchen Trei. I'm bordering Reuven's field from both sides, Mizrach and Marv, Umetzah Shimon Ruchen Trei. And I'm bordering Shimon's field from two sides, north and south. So if he would say that, then you meant to sell the whole field. He meant to sell the whole field. But because he didn't say that, we only assume that he meant to sell the middle piece over here. But if he was careful and said Reuven's field and borders Reuven's field from both sides, Reuven here and Reuven here, and Shimon's field, Shimon here, then he meant to sell the entire box. Now we go to a question over here. What happens if a guy sells a field, but it only points out the corners where it borders? He forgets to mention that it borders this guy's field and this guy's field and this guy's field, as you can see in the picture over here. He just mentions where the corners hit up. Did he mean to sell the whole field and he just didn't want to, make a whole spiel out of the whole thing? Or is he only selling two pieces of lines in his field? Like the X, maybe he's only selling the yellow part over here because he forgot to mention the other fields that it borders. That's the first question of the Gemara. The Gemara then asks a question: what happens if he put the borders of the field in the contract, but he only mentioned like a gum? A gum is like let's say an F or a half T. He only mentioned where it says the red over here in the picture over here, and the red over here in the picture. Did he mean to sell the whole field, or did he mean to sell just that's in between the reds where the yellow? Maybe he's only selling these pieces over here. That's the second question of the Gemara. Now the third question of the Gemara is a field. Here's the field. The field is right in the middle. Okay, the field is always in the middle. It borders Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Yosef, and Binyamin. Borders all these fields, but he only mentioned part. He only mentioned Reuven and Shimon's field, and then he mentioned Yisachar's field and Yosef's field. He forgot to mention that it borders Shimon's and Yehuda's and Zvulun and Binyamin. So perhaps he just didn't want to mention the whole thing, so he sold the whole field in the middle. Or maybe he's only selling part of his field like a pizza. He's dividing up. So wherever it's brown over here, that's what he's selling. Whatever is yellow, he's not selling because he didn't forgot to mention those borders that it borders this guy's Yehuda's field also. It borders Zvulun's field and borders Binyamin's field, Binyamin Shimon's field. So he did it intermittently. That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara, let's just repeat. We're going to ask you a question. If you only mentioned the corners, mahu, what's the din? Kimin gam, if you only mentioned like a F, like a T, half T, mahu, what do you say? Did he sell the field or he just sell a little portion of the field? And then we go to Amid Beis. Besei rugin mahu. If he only mentioned every other border, mahu, what would be the din? Teku, the Gemara remains by a question over here because we don't know what he meant to sell. Did he meant to sell the entire field or just pieces of his middle field? And the Gemara remains this unresolved. Now the Gemara says like this: Meitza loy, meitza rishon, meitza shenu, meitza shlishi. If he made the borders he made the borders. He said he demarcated the borders of the 1, 2, 3. He gave 3 borders. But he forgot to mention the 4th border. So what did he mean over there? He made it like a ches. He only mentioned 3 out of the 4 borders. Amar Rav says, Kana hakol, you get everything. Chutz mi meitz revi. The 4th border, that one line 4th border, that he didn't sell. That's what he meant. Shmuel says, Afila meitz revi. He meant to sell even the 4th border of the field, even that one line, the border. But he mentioned 3 out of the 4 borders. That's good enough. For Rav Asi is the most strict. He says, Loi kona elatelem echad al pnei kulai. Rav Asi said that because he only mentioned 3 borders, it means that he's only selling the 3 lines, like a ches. He's only selling the borders, but not the field in between. Not like Rav, and not like Shmuel. He's the most strictest. Because the fact is that he only mentioned 3 out of the 4 borders, so perhaps he only sold the borders, but not the field itself. So Sova lo Karav. Ravasi, in essence, holds like Rav. The Amma who said Shiuri Shiar, the fact that he didn't mention the 4th border means he left something, the seller left something for himself. Because since he left over 1 border, he left over the entire field proper. So what is the halach in these cases? So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Rava said, Hilchus of the halacha is Kana hakol chutz memetz ravi. Like Rav said, you get everything in between, except that 1 line 4th border you don't get. V'loi Amram, the Rava adds a caveat. We paskin like Rav, eladuloi muvla, that it's not swallowed in. Swallowed in means it's not, the 4th border was not swallowed into the property itself. Let's say the picture of loy muvla, here's the 4th border. As you can see, I drew a line over there. So then the seller probably wants to keep the 4th border for himself. But if the 4th border is swallowed into the other 3 borders that he mentioned, and the 4th border is more or less swallowed in, then he meant to sell it. And then he didn't keep it for himself. That's what he said. So aval muvla, but if it's swallowed in, kana. And then we said, then Rava said, v'chilai muvla name, even if he didn't swallow it in, it's not part of the sale. Loy amran ela deika alei richba de dikla v'haba tisha kabin. There's a row of trees here, or it produces 9 kabin. This is a valuable piece of strip of land, so perhaps he kept it if it wasn't swallowed in. Aval. But if it did not have, that row does not have a group of trees, or it doesn't produce 9 kavim, kana, then the buyer buys it, because why would the seller want to keep it if it's an unproductive little piece of land that you can't do anything with? Even if it's swallowed in, if it's swallowed in, even though it's a valuable piece of land, but it's swallowed into the other 3 boundaries that he mentioned, still we would say kana. This the purchaser bought it, and the buyer, even though it's a valuable piece of land, he did not leave it over for himself because that 4th border is swallowed into the demarcations of the other 3 lines. Says the Gemara. But that's the first version of Rava. Amri. Others say this is what Rava said. Rava said, Hilka said the halacha is kana hakol. You get everything. Afila meitzaravi, even the 4th side. You get everything, even the 4th side, because Rava paskin like who? Like Shmuel. V'loy amran eladul mivla. It's only because it's swallowed in. That's when you get the 4th side. Avaloy mivla. If it's not swallowed in, loy kana. You don't get that 4th side because it's not part of it. So that you paskin like Shmuel only if it's muvla, but not if it's not muvla. But he muvla name, even if it was swallowed in, like amra adadleka alei richba dedikle hava tishish kabin. If it's swallowed in and you can't do anything with it, then you get the 4th piece, that piece. If it has something like that, loikana, then you don't get it, because at least it has 1 mila. One advantage is that you can produce something here. It is a row of trees. So because it's a row of trees, or it produces 9 cows, so if it's a valuable piece of land, perhaps the seller didn't mean to sell it. From here we see, if it's not swallowed in, even if it's not a valuable piece of land, it's just not swallowed into the other parts, then the purchaser did not buy it. So the Gemara, in one place, Rava paskin like Shmuel, and in one version, Rava paskin like Rav. So the Gemara just tries to give the common denominator here. Shamina mitavaya lishna de Rava. You see from the 2 languages of Rava, the besoda in a field, loy shai v'loy midi. You didn't meet in the field itself. You certainly get the field itself, whatever in between the boundaries. Not like Ravasi, who said you only get the borders, not the in between field, because it's either Rav or Shmuel. But Shamina Nami, and you see from Rava, the halacha is the hechad the muvla. If it's swallowed in, It doesn't, it's not a valuable piece of land. It doesn't have a row of trees. Even if it's swallowed in, Connie, then the person did not leave it over for himself. Even according to the first version. He just sold that. Loy movla, if it's not swallowed in, the ika lay richba de dikla, the hava teskavin, and it's a valuable piece of land, loy kana, then you didn't sell it. Because the best thing, it's not swallowed in, and also it's a valuable piece of land, so he didn't sell it. It has two advantages. But the difference between the two versions is like this. The mivla, if it's swallowed in, so that's no good. But ba'ika alai, but it has a row of trees. Or the other thing, loy mivla, if it's not swallowed in, right? But v'leik alai, it doesn't have the advantage of a row of trees. So it has something good and something bad. Itmol alahaigisa, according to the first version, according to one version, you coin it, or according to the other version, you're not coin it. And the other one says the opposite. So if the machlokes between the two versions is if it has one good thing going for it. For example, it's loy muvla, but it has one bad thing, that it doesn't produce anything. So there, shuda dedaini, you will say the judge is up to the judge to decide if he wants to include it into the sale or not, and we leave that up to the judge. One more piece of Gemara, and then we'll stop in a minute. Amar Rabba. So we'll start. Amar Rabba. Rabba said, a guy owns a property. Let's say a whole piece of property he owns, but he owns half of it. So he owns a half of property, shares it with another person, and he's selling it to a third party. He's selling his half. So when he said palga de isli ba'ara, I'm selling you half that I have in this piece of land. So then palga, he's selling his entire share, which is half the land. But if he's saying palga ba'ara de isli, I'm selling you half of the land that I have. So then he meant to say half of what he has. So he owns half the land, and half of that is riva. He's only selling 25% of that property. Amalei Abaya tried to understand the language. What's the difference between if you put palga de isli ba'ara, that's the order, half that I have in this land, or palga ba'ara de isli, half of the land that I have? Abaya couldn't understand how the order of the language can change the contract. He didn't clearly understand it. So he asked Rabba that question. Ishtik, Rabba was silent. So apparently, maybe Rabba agreed with Abaya that maybe there is no difference. And maybe in both situations, he's only selling half of what he owns, which is 25%. That's what Abaya thought. Amar Abaya said, Anos Sabri, I held that since Anos Sabri midi ishtik, since Rabba was silent, Kabuli Kibla, he accepted what I said. Wallahi, it's not true. Chazina Hanishtar de Nafib Geibar, I saw many stories that came out of Rabba's court. It said some said like this: Palga de Isli Ba'ara, when it said half that I have in this land, the guy was selling Palga, his whole entire share, which is half the property. Palga de Ba'ara de Isli, when the document said I'm selling half of the land that I own in this land, so then Rabba Paskin River that it's a quarter. So Rabba did not agree with Abaya's understanding. He did not accept Abaya's reasoning, and he maintained his position that there is a difference. If you say palga de isli ba'ara, then you're selling your entire portion of the land that you own. And if you say palga ba'ara de isli, you're saying half of the land that I own. You're selling half of your position in this partnership property. But Rabba didn't explain his reasoning to Abaya, so that's left unresolved. We'll continue tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, Daf Samach Gimel, from 4 lines from the bottom, on Daf Samach Beis and Beis.